Guten Tag, APUSH. We have a new video today. It's the Bee's Knees by the big cheese himself, Mr. Linegar. Let's make history today as we jaw over Unit 2, Day 3. But first, let's do our daily punishment. Smaller babies may be delivered by a stork, but the heavier ones need a crane. Here are your key terms for today. The Boston Massacre, the Non-Importation Agreements, Sam Adams, the Committee of Correspondence, the Tea Act, the Boston Tea Party, the Intolerable Acts, also known as the Coercive Acts, the Quebec Act, the First Continental Congress, the Association, the Battle of Lexington and Concord. And here are our key concepts, the big ideas for today. The causes of the American Revolution, the colonial reaction to British acts, and vice versa, and the pluses and minuses of the colonists going into the American Revolution and the battles. What do they have going for them? What do they have going against them? Let's talk about the Boston Massacre. After the Townshend Acts, the colonies will not be happy with the Townshend Acts, even though they were pretty light taxes, and some of the colonists will start doing non-importation agreements again. The British are actually going to send soldiers into Boston after the non-importation agreements. They're kind of getting fed up with the colonial BS. So the British will send soldiers into Boston. This will eventually lead to something called the Boston Massacre. The British soldiers will be outside in Boston. They'll be taunted by some of the colonists. They'll be called lobster backs, bloody backs. They'll start throwing stuff at the British soldiers, like snowballs and some other stuff. Eventually, the British will fire on the colonists. The British soldiers felt like their lives were in danger. 11 colonists will be killed or wounded, including Crispus Attucks. He was one of the ringleaders in the Sons of Liberty. He was a Native American and African descent, and he'll be the first person killed. This is considered one of the big precursors to the American Revolution. The British soldiers that fired on the crowd will be arrested by the colonial government. John Adams, who will be a revolutionary leader, will actually defend the British soldiers. He'll say that they deserve a fair trial no matter what. And a lot of them will actually be found not guilty or very light punishments. Here's a painting of the Boston Massacre. The Boston Massacre is going to be painted by Paul Revere. It's a really good example of propaganda used in the time period. You see the evil British firing on the poor colonialists. They're, God, don't do this. They're just getting shot on. You don't see a bunch of drunk colonists throwing stuff at the British, which is actually what happened. But, you know, propaganda, baby. One of the big leaders of the American Revolution will be Samuel Adams. He's going to help form the Sons of Liberty, which will be a revolutionary organization that will push for more colonial freedom and eventually independence. Samuel Adams is going to start the Committee of Correspondence, where like some of the major colonial leaders in the different colonies, so like Massachusetts, Virginia, they start corresponding with each other. This was meant to spread resistance ideas, and it was meant to help spread to other colonies, and also like for them to get an idea of what's going on in each colony, so they could have a more united action. This is the first example of like a precursor to like the American Congresses, like the First Continental Congress, which won't happen for a couple years. Let's talk about the fuse that's going to eventually really start off the American Revolution. That's the Tea Act. The British are going to pass the Tea Act to kind of help out the British East India Company, which was one of their major joint stock companies for trade of tea. They're going to put a tax on tea for all areas. The colonists are going to be very upset about this. How dare you? By this time, like the Tea Act is much more of an external tax, but the colonists don't want any taxation now. You know, they're shouting the phrase, no taxation without representation. Whatever, bro. And this is going to lead to the colonists being trolls. They're going to do the Boston Tea Party in 1773. Some of the leaders of the Sons of Liberty are going to break into a British ship, and they're going to toss the tea overboard. They're going to be disguised as American Indians, Native Americans, and they'll destroy an entire shipment of tea as they toss it in Boston Harbor. And, you know, very half-heartedly dress as Native Americans. Here you see them right here, just being completely trolls. The British will not be upset. The British will be very upset about this. They felt like the colonists had destroyed British property and they needed to pay for it. So they're going to pass something called the Coercive Acts. The colonists are going to call it the Intolerable Acts because we're dramatic. This was punishment for the Boston Tea Party. It's going to close the port of Boston. It's going to do a restriction on town hall meetings. So they're, quote unquote, destroying some of their historical liberties as Englishmen. Also, at the same time, the British government will pass the Quebec Act. This will give the French Canadians right to their Catholic religion. They could still retain their customs and have a representative government. This was actually a very good and tolerant thing, but the colonists are low-key Protestants, and they actually thought the Quebec Act was aimed at them. The British were just being trolls and did the Quebec Act just to upset them. So, Quebec Act happened at the same time, but it really was not meant to punish the colonists. Here's a famous political cartoon of the Intolerable Acts. You see, and like the whole Tea Act and everything, you see the British government forcing tea down a Native American throat. Because remember, guys, it was the Native Americans that did the Boston Tea Party. Whatever. What's going to happen is after the Intolerable Acts, the colonies are going to want to have a unified action. They're going to call the First Continental Congress. Everybody but Georgia will attend. Georgia needed the British Army to protect them from Spanish and Native American attacks. This was not a legislative body. They could not pass laws. It was called the Association. They really just drafted resolutions. And their resolution they're going to do is a complete boycott of all British goods. Great Britain is going to say no, and Britain is not willing to back down anymore. So this leads us to first blood. Lexington and Concord. The Battle of Lexington and Concord, which is actually two battles. April 19th, 1775. Great Britain was looking for weapons that the colonists had outside of Boston. They're going to attack the colonists at Lexington. The British will win. And then they'll go to Concord, and the colonists will kind of like come back together, and they'll actually push the British government outside of Concord. This is the shot heard around the world. These are the beginning battles of the American Revolution. British win Lexington, the colonists win Concord. Let's talk lastly about some of the pluses and minuses of the colonists going into the American Revolution. They are self-sustaining. Remember, they're going to be fighting this war on their own land, so all they have to do is draw. They're going to have morale on their side. They have a cause they really believe in. However, they will be poorly organized. The British Army was the best army in the world. They don't have any kind of industrial input, so they're going to have to buy munitions and weapons from other countries. They're really going to need to get allies fast. So one of the things you're going to see is the colonies really trying to get allies, especially from France. All right, guys, and that's all I have for you for today. Until next time, deuces, 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 yeah.